Protect your car with 3W Liners all-weather floor mats. Made from durable materials like TPE and rubber, our mats are designed to withstand rain, snow, and mud with deep grooves to trap dirt and liquids. For a custom fit and advanced protection, visit 3W Liners. That's the number 3, WLINERS.com today.
Farmhounds offers natural treats and chews made with quality products that support family farms, regenerative agriculture, and humane farming practices. Give your dog the best with wholesome, organic ingredients that promote health and happiness. Shop now at farmhounds.com.
Hello and welcome once again to Trail Daddy, one of your favorite Portland Trailblazers podcasts. We don't hope to be the only one. We are not able to go every week because of other scheduling conflicts and just how busy my life is, but we're here every other week or so, catching you up on the Portland Trailblazers and everything going on in their orbits. I am Dave Deckard, managing editor of Blazers Edge, and we are in the midst of, well, the best losing streak of the season, I would say. The Blazers have lost 5 straight as we speak, and 6 of their last 7. But they've been playing some really good basketball. It feels like things have come together. Now, they've had continued injuries to DeAndre Ayton, obviously, so they're losing a bit of offensive punch at center. And Jeremy Grant has been in and out, so they've lost his experience, although some people would say that that's been a plus because Jeremy has not been shooting really well. We'll talk more about that later. But overall, despite having lost 6 of 7, they've been looking pretty good. They've been playing active defense. They have been running the floor. They have been rebounding hard. Blazer fans have gotten to see some of their young players, which they've been clamoring for all season. And the Blazers have put a scare into some pretty credible opponents. I mean, they took the Cleveland Cavaliers to overtime back on March 2nd, and that was a thrilling game that Portland almost won. They beat the 76ers the game after that because who doesn't? They had a so-so. I mean, they tried. They played hard against the Celtics. The Celtics just had way too much of a three-point attack. And without mobile centers, eventually the Blazers paid for their sins, and Boston just rained threes on their head. The Oklahoma City Thunder demolished Portland. That was expected. Probably the big loss, the one that hurt, was when they returned home after a 4-3 road trip, having beaten 4 bad teams and lost to 3 really good ones. The Blazers had the Detroit Pistons, who were in the middle. The Pistons are a success story this year, and they play pretty well, and they're on the arc that the Blazers are on. In other words, last year the Pistons were terrible. I mean, historically terrible. But they've got young players. They've got Cade Cunningham. They've been building around these young players. And this year they're looking pretty good. So it was a good test for Portland, both in terms of, is this good play sustainable and real? And how close are they to people who are actually in their neighborhood as far as NBA teams? And the Blazers kind of laid an egg versus Detroit. It didn't look very good. That was disappointing and deflating, and then the Golden State Warriors handled them pretty convincingly. Also disappointing and deflating. Those are the bad losses. Those are the discouraging, oh, maybe the season is over. But just when you think that's going to happen, they come back home, play the New York Knicks, and there's no Jalen Brunson, obviously, as we should say, with a lot of these good teams. A lot of these good teams have been missing their best players, so there's an asterisk by how well Portland played. But, you know, the Blazers, like we said, also missing DeAndre Ayton, often missing Jeremy Grant, sometimes other players. The New York Knicks come into town expecting a win. Instead, the Blazers take them to overtime, lose on a Mikal Bridges last-second three in overtime. And it was really the most thrilling game of the season. Those who are cynics and or on the tank train would say best possible outcome. The Blazers played fantastically. It was an exciting game, 42 lead changes, most in the league this year, second most in NBA history. Fantastic game, and the Blazers got an extra ping pong ball maybe from losing. We'll see, but they didn't win, which is good for the tankers anyway. I would say overall, I mean, for a 5-game losing streak, losing 6 of 7, spirits are pretty high. Now, attention, I think, is starting to wane. I feel like we know who the Trailblazers are now. I think you get that sense too. So it's like, okay, there's a little less incentive to figure things out. We're looking more toward the end of the season, obviously, than any progression through it. But overall, this is as well and as high as spirits have been and the level of play has been in any losing streak all season long and really for the last few years. I would say, actually, that this 2-week stretch has been the hope that maybe there's a light at the end of the tunnel. Not close, it's just still a glimmer, and there might be a train or two coming down those tracks toward you, but somewhere there, if the Blazers can continue to play like this, if their young players look fairly decent, which they often do and have in the last couple of weeks, then maybe we're starting to see the future of the Blazers take shape instead of just slogging through a present that seems kind of hopeless. I think that is the takeaway from this. And, I would say also this. There are teams like the Knicks, like the Celtics, like the Cavaliers, who will not forget that they played the Blazers. And that's a victory in itself, The New York Knicks were celebrating like heck when they beat Portland. That's not supposed to happen on a Wednesday night in the middle of March. All right. You're not supposed to be a signature win for the Knicks. The Blazers were, and they're getting more and more respect. Some of the players on the Blazers are getting more and more respect. There are 3 names that really stand out there. The first is Scoot Henderson, for whom the Knicks game was a coming out party because he not only hit 3-point shots, but he did some things in that Knicks game to bring his team back. He scored the last 8 points in regulation, the first 2 in overtime for Portland. He literally saved the game for the Blazers. He put a hurting on the Knicks, made them look silly defensively. And that was a big deal. Not just because it put together some things that Scoot has been working on all season, but literally because it happened against New York. And yes, it's late East Coast then, not everybody was watching, but Scoot Henderson served. That was his debutante ball right there. He came down the stairs and said, I am ready for this. That doesn't mean he's not going to go up and down again. He will. But I think Scoot Henderson with that game transcended the miasma that has been dogging the air around him since his rookie season. He's put to bed that rookie season performance and has now kind of passed the final exam, become a new Scoot Henderson. May not be the Scoot Henderson that the Blazers expected when they drafted 3rd overall in 2023. May not be a superstar Scoot Henderson or even a star Scoot Henderson, but at least he's not the Scoot Henderson that the Blazers saw last year and the rest of the league. And that is something to celebrate. I don't think from now on, when you describe Scoot, you're going to go back to his rookie season as anything other than a point of reference, maybe for how far he's gone, or if he never pans out, it'll be mentioned in terms of him being a bust, so to speak, or at least for the Blazers. But it's not going to be something that defines him. That was not guaranteed coming into the season, but he's done it. And that deserves a clap, and more than a golf clap. Look, his 37% 3-point shooting, paring down turnovers, scoring on the drive, all the things that we've talked about. Oh, the pick and roll game and getting the ball to centers, which he's turned out to be pretty good at. All those things are definite. All those things are repeated and real, and he deserves credit for that. So I think Scoot, above all, is the guy who gets the most surprise. And you can watch the rest of the league transition from, hey, last year he was this, but now you can forget that. He's something else entirely. that's a good story for Scoot. Shaedon Sharpe is another one. He is more intermittent, but look, his scoring is pretty good. And when he goes off, he goes off. And when Shaedon Sharpe gets on a tear, ooh boy, that's a lot. And there's nothing like it. And you see the sizzle and you see the airtime that make him special. And I think the most special thing about Shaedon right now is that when he elevates now, either when he pulls up in the mid-range, which he still doesn't do enough, or when he goes to the basket and elevates, it's not a hope anymore. He expects something to happen. When he pulls up in the mid-range, you can watch it on the finish of his shot, watch his hand, when it flicks, look at his body straight up and down, look at him, even though he's elevating pretty high, he's not usually drifting sideways anymore toward or away from the bucket. His body is straight and under control. When he's in the air, his arms are elevated, his wrist is loose, his release is pure, and you look and you say, that shot is going in. Now, this is not true of his three-point shot still. It's not true of every layup he tries to make, but that pull-up jumper game in the mid-range is pretty pristine. That is a fantastic development for him. The other thing is when he does elevate and goes strong into the lane, he's either going to dunk it or, key point, he's going to draw a foul now. And again, he needs to do this more, but I understand it's difficult. That's probably hard on his body. It's no fun. But you know what? When he jumps into opponents now, he is getting the whistle. And that is a powerful development that if he continues to develop his scoring prowess, that will serve him well. Because the key from Shaedon going from 17 or 18 points a game to 22 or 23 is not really making more shots. I think I should say this, it's not necessarily taking a lot more shots. It's not becoming a volume scorer. For Shaedon, it's this. First of all, got to get a little better, brush up on that three-point shooting. If you hit another one of those a game, that is 3 points right there. But the other thing that's really going to be big for him is free throws, because he could be, if he hits that three, an inside-out threat where he strokes the three-pointer, makes the defender come up, gets half a step past him, and this is Shaedon's problem. He cannot get that initial dribble yet reliably past the defender. If he does, that gives him airspace to elevate, then he's going to draw fouls either from the side, from his defenders trying to stay with him, or from the help defender coming over too late or not getting up high enough, and then Sharpe's going to draw free throws, and then his scoring average is going to go up. So a little bit better on the three-pointers, a little bit, a few more free throws, and Shaedon Sharpe's going to be good. I think we've seen him trend toward that. He's had some wonderful performances, so he is often mentioned, and that is really very good. I guess there are four, really. The third one is Deni Avdija. And we've known about him for a while in Portland. We've watched him, especially in the second half of the season, step forward, be really more aggressive trying to score, really more aggressive trying to pass the ball. Now, he's committing a lot of turnovers. He still needs to, I think, have a little bit, his judgment needs a little bit of work. But still, having that 5 or 6 assist potential from your small forward or shooting guard or whatever he is playing at the moment is pretty good. And also having that secondary ball handler, sometimes becoming a primary ball handler, especially, of course, on the break. That's good. I don't need to sing Denny's praises too much. You already know about him. The rest of the league is catching up to him. That's good. The last one, though, the really much maligned guy who is throwing scares into opposing teams is Anthony Simons. And I know Simons still doesn't defend really great, although I think he's trying more. I think the scheme is easier for him, but he's still not that effective there. He's not a true point guard. I think we're seeing that more and more as the season goes along. That's where the Blazers are trying to start him and play him. I'm not sure that's going to work. Yay, if you're Deni Avdija, you get to run the offense even more, but he's not going to be a point guard solution for Portland, I don't think. However, he is that get in the oven, turn it up to 425 and bake scoring guard. I mean, he's scoring from multi-levels. The two things, his quick three-pointers or deep three-pointers, those have been great. In fact, they've come around in the last couple of weeks. I love his release. I love the quickness and confidence with which he's shooting those threes. That was a little bit missing earlier in the season, and it really hurt Simons. I think he is good right now with how he is approaching the three-point shot, which is the first and primary weapon because that spreads the defense. It's also something he can do that a lot of his Blazers teammates don't do as well. But the other thing is his layup game. Oh boy. Now, I know you're going to say, well, he gets blocked or he gets impeded. Well, all the Blazers do. Only Scoot Henderson is really that bulldozer, and even he gets stopped or turns the ball over sometimes. Shaedon Sharpe isn't a great layup guy. Anthony Simons actually kind of is. And his release around the sides of the backboard is so hard because he's not releasing it at the rim. He's often releasing it over a defender from literally beyond the side of the backboard and putting that ball off the backboard and in on the run. It is super hard to do. You can hear opponents and opposing commentators go, oh my gosh. And it's something special that Ant has. So he's shown that off. Particularly, I like his fourth quarter play in that he has relied on the three, but he's mixed it up down the stretch, especially when the Blazers need a key bucket. Ant has been driving to the rack, and he's been converting some of those layups, and that just makes him near unguardable. So he's been getting noticed too. I think really in this stretch, those four Blazers have completely stood out to the positive, to the point where people are noticing Henderson, Sharpe, Avdia, and Simons. Big deal. Obviously, we should also mention Toumani Camara. He is always there. This is no surprise. He's been steady all season. People already know about him. It wouldn't be fair to leave him out of that. That hasn't changed much in the last few weeks. Although I will say his driving game has gotten better. And that's one of the things that was missing earlier in the season. It's a big, big deal for him because, again, it changes him from that specialist. First he started as just a defensive specialist. Then he added the three-point shot, which he's about 36, 37%. Not bad, but good enough. And his corner threes are actually looking good. That's the most important floor spreading, hide him in the corner kind of thing for him. So he's got that. That's really good. But with that corner three, if he can drive when they close out hard, now he's become the complete threat, or at least as complete as he needs to be. I don't think the Blazers will ever need Toumani Camara to take the ball from the top or the diagonal at the three-point arc and to put a move on his man and score one-on-one. That's not going to be his game. They have other players to do that. But if Camara can hit the corner three when open or drive past a closing defender, bingo, he's everything you could ever want. And wow, that is fantastic. He's been showing some of that. That's good. Now, to the negative in this stretch. There have been a couple things. A mild negative. Donovan Clingan is adjusting to starting and adjusting to playing against a lot of different kind of defenders. Or, sorry, not defenders, but offensive players. Although defenders too, right? Look, this is not going to be easy for him because he plays a particular kind of game that A, the rest of the league doesn't always play, and B, the Blazers can't always play either. He would be super happy if he could stay within 12 feet of the bucket on both ends, roam, block shots, stop drivers, kind of roam the middle there, and that's all he has to do. Opposing teams are involving him in screen plays, making him defend the perimeter. Opposing teams and his own teammates are kind of making him close out at the three-point arc. That's not his strength. We're finding that out. And it's okay. I mean, that was expected, and he will learn. I don't think he's ever going to be fleet of foot out there, but it does show you how critically important it is for him to stay fit, to keep the weight down, to keep the agility up, because he's already, even when completely fit, not exactly the best example of this in the whole NBA. If he slows down, if he develops that Jokic dad bod, I think that opponents will exploit him even more. So he has to keep at least a hand somewhere near three-point shooters if he's called to close out, and he's learning how to do that. I think that opponents, in addition, have learned how to take advantage of his defensive aggressiveness. They've done some pump fakes. They've done some drives, going up against his body. And he's a rookie, and he's big, which means he's going to draw a lot of fouls. And we knew that would happen as soon as he started playing more. It has happened in a few games. So the long story is, this is Donovan Clingan. And it's not different than we thought Clingan would be. The stuff that you saw early in the season was orange juice concentrate, all right? It's in the can. It's super flavored. It's the essence of what Clingan is. A can of Clingan concentrate blocking 4 shots a game while in the lane playing 13 minutes, right? Because those 13 minutes are the ones that he can get away with against opponent second units and, against certain matchups that favor him. Also with teammates that can help cater to him. Like they can stay in front of second unit drivers and they can shadow those drivers into Clingan's wheelhouse. There you go. It's the Donovan Clingan concentrate. When he starts, you have to just add water and you have to get the mixture right and you have to make it not too weak, not too strong. There's a lot more that goes into it. Some nights that pitcher is full. Some nights that pitcher is empty. Some nights it just doesn't work and you have to dump it out. Part and parcel of the learning process. Clingan will get better at this, but it is a little bit of a shock to go from the pure goodness of the concentrate to the whole pitcher of watered down stuff. The other one, of course, that people are pointing out is Jeremy Grant. And honestly, I'm not sure what's up with Jeremy. I suspect that we're going to find out that injuries are a part of this. I do not subscribe yet to the theory that he is aged out of playing. He is only 30 years old. 30 is still in your prime. I mean, if you're really talking about aging in your 30s, there's not a magic thing where you go from 29 to 30 and you are done. Really, we're talking 32, 33, whatever. So I think there could be a couple things. First of all, again, I bet we find out that injuries were an issue. I think also that once Jeremy has not been the first option on this team, and he really was at the beginning of the year, he and Simons were it, and Simons even deferred to Jeremy a bit because that's what Ant has been doing for his teammates. So look, I think when Jeremy was the number one option, was scoring 20 points a game and was getting a lot of touches, it was easier for him to play with all his heart. And also at that point, the record was still new. And yes, the Blazers were losing, but there was a winning streak in there around the turn of 2005. And there was still something to play for. I think honestly, the clock is running out on this season. I think that everybody knows the Blazers will be super lucky to make the play-in tournament, period, and probably won't, that there's not a lot to play for here. And I think probably mentally and emotionally, a player of Grant's experience kind of knows that. I'm not saying he's dogging it. I'm not saying it's intentional. I'm just saying that, you know what, that it's human and there's a difference between gunning for playoff position or gunning for something amazing and just kind of going out there and playing when this season is not about you and not about your team winning. I think some of that may be eating into Jeremy. And you know what? Honestly, I think either a renewed season or a trade to another team will lift his spirits and his game again. I'm not too worried about him, but he hasn't been looking good since he came back from injury for one or both of those reasons, or maybe more, who knows? But obviously he's been kind of a negative in that stretch. But hey, that's still 4 or 5 positives, only a couple negatives. I guess you'd count Ayton's injury in there, so maybe 3 negatives. Still pretty good for the Blazers. You gotta like what's going on. Now, what do they have coming up? We have a game against the Toronto Raptors on Sunday, the Washington Wizards after that, so a couple chances to get better. You would hope they wouldn't lose those unless you are Captain Tank. But then you got the Memphis Grizzlies, Denver Nuggets, Boston Celtics, and Blazers Edge Night with the Cleveland Cavaliers. Those are all at home, but those are all tough games, especially Denver, Boston, Cleveland. Of course, you wouldn't expect to win any of those. I hope that Cleveland is the winnable one. Maybe they'll rest somebody. Boston seems to be able to outshoot Portland, and Denver appears to have the Blazers' numbers. So, Cleveland, Blazers Edge Night, I wouldn't mind a win there. Obviously, the Raptors and Wizards, you expect to be wins at home. So if they go 3-3 in their next 6, they'll be doing pretty well. I can hear everybody groaning out there that, oh, we don't want the wins, but you know what? This team is probably going to go get them anyway, so be it. After that stretch, they have 6 out of 7 on the road to almost close the season. So basically, they have a 6-game homestand, 6 of 7 on the road, and then they are in the final 2 games of the season. So we are really winding down here. And it's been an interesting season. There have been some growth spurts, but, amid the frustrations, and there have been a lot of them, there have also been some high points. Now, let me intercept this right now, because over the weekend, as you hear this, on the site, I've done a 2-part series on Chauncey Billups. We addressed Chauncey's situation and coaching toward the beginning months of the season. In the first couple months, we talked about him, I think, 2 or 3 times, maybe a little bit more, because we were seeing what new developments had happened in the season, right? And is there anything new for coaching emphasis this year? How's it going with this new lineup? How does Billups appear to be relating to the players? What are the schemes like? We talked about all of that stuff either in our recaps or in separate mailbags or whatever it was. Between then and now, we've kind of let that go because the coaching approach itself hasn't changed too radically. There have been evolutions, and we've talked about some of those, but it's not like Billups has become a whole new coach, or it's not like all the emphases have changed. It's been a pretty normal season up to now. He's been winning a few more games than he has been. They're at a 42% win rate now, which is actually, if the season finishes like that, that would be Billups's high. So, hey, not bad so far for Chauncey. In any case, someone wrote into the mailbag, wasn't the first time, but after a few months have elapsed and as we're getting towards the close of the season, and the Blazers have to make a decision this summer about whether to pick up Billups' option or extend him or whatever, whether he's going to be here 1 more year or several more years or 0 more years, they're going to have to figure out. It's time to talk about this again. And I can already hear the screams because I intentionally split this into 2 parts. And the first part, I led off with the things that Chauncey Billups actually does well, which is going to, I can tell already, cheese people off. But you know what? We actually need to, look, we do this with Anthony Simons. We did this with Scoot Henderson. We do this with a lot of players. DeAndre Ayton, all right? Like, very few of these players are 100% good or 100% bad. They all have strengths and weaknesses. Those show. Some are more advantageous at some times, some are less. Some come out more, some come out less. But Anthony Simons, just because he's not a great defender, doesn't mean that he's useless. And just because he might not be the right player for the Portland Trail Blazers' needs right now, doesn't mean that he wasn't that last year or the year before. Doesn't mean that he's a bad player and is no good to anybody or any team. And we have to avoid the temptation, I think, to go 100% to the end of the spectrum or the other end on any of these issues. That's also true of coaching, too. And you know what? This is my thing. This is how I've always written. This is how I always think. If 97% of the people are going to say one thing, I'm not sure why I need to be that 98%. Why do you need 1 more percent there? If 97% of the people want Chauncey fired, it's not really valuable to say, yep, okay, let's do that. Instead, if we're really going to analyze what's the part that we underrate, what's the part that we don't see, we should take a look at that first, and then only after we are sure that we have credited that, do we then go where the preponderance of the emotion and evidence and public opinion is, because then we can put that in perspective. For me, it's kind of like, I don't know, checking safety belts on a roller coaster. Yeah, you can check the front seat. Everybody checks the front seat, but there's a rider in the left side of car 7 too, and that's the one that nobody checks. That seat belt is also important. So if we really want to be serious about analysis, we need to check all the seats, and especially the ones that get left behind. So, despite knowing people were going to scream about this because they just want to hear Chauncey should be fired, I led off with the things that Coach Billups, I think, does pretty well. And there were 3 or 3.5 that I think were pretty clear. And actually, I didn't think I was going to enjoy writing that article, but I kind of do. And I think that the one I liked best writing about was just the general unselfishness of the team. That I get it, it's modern basketball, passing as part of it, the floor spreading, the 3-point will tend to make a team pass more. I get it. However, Not necessarily every team, and especially not necessarily young teams. I mean, you've got players on this team who are very much playing for their NBA reputations and their next contract. You've also got players who are primarily offensive players. I'm talking about Anthony Simons. I'm talking about Shaden Sharp, even Scoot Henderson, right? DeAndre Ayton. Absolutely what you'd call offensive first players. When the Blazers go out there, and I was thinking about this, it's one of the things I do. Just don't, okay, yes, you narrow down into a certain play, and we can do that too, but just back up. Take the 100-mile high view and look at the tapestry of what's going on here. That ball moves. They are actually fairly agnostic about who takes a shot, and as long as it's open, where that shot comes from. And they move the ball, and they share with each other to the degree necessary to make that happen. And you know what? Anthony Simons, even though he mostly scores in ISO himself, will not necessarily take over an entire game. Certain stretches, yes, for better or worse, and there's been both, Simons will do that. Jeremy Grant will too, especially if it looks like his team needs scoring and nobody's doing it. He, as a veteran and as a scorer, will take over the ball. That is actually kind of appropriate, the way an older brother kind of, if you're riding a bike and your bike starts to wobble and your brother's riding beside you, stick out a hand and steady it. That's kind of the vibe you get from Jeremy. However, those two examples aside, the Blazers are completely unconcerned about who's going to score, who's going to get the most points, and where the next shot or who the next shot is coming from. They're more concerned about getting the ball to the right person. And I watched them. I watched them move the ball. I realized I haven't had a complaint. Turnovers, sure. Sometimes the passes are either slow or ill-advised. But you know what? They're making those passes. I'm counting on just a few fingers the times when I've really noticed, this guy is dominating and everybody else is completely standing around. And some of each has happened, right? But for the most part, they're really unconcerned and unselfish. And I think that's to the credit of the coach. I think that he has instilled in these players the sense of the right way to play team basketball. Whether they can actually execute it or not 100% of the time is up to their talents and age and skills and the mismatch of the roster and stuff like that. I get it. But they are really quite unselfish for a young team with quite a few offensive players in the main rotation. And I actually like that. And you can tell it. You can tell it in, for instance, the way they run. Everyone, from the point guard to the centers, when they get the chance, will break down the floor, which means everyone expects that there's a chance that they will get the ball. They're actually not doing horrible. There was a stretch when they were bad in transition defense. They've kind of fixed that up. They actually get back in transition now. And that is the ultimate unselfishness, because there's no points on the scoreboard that say it, for under your name anyway. And it's a sacrifice and it's an effort that you make in order to keep your team whole and sound. And the Blazers are pretty much doing it lately. I like that. The unselfishness, the effort is there. And that's a coaching issue. That's a good thing, right? I also pointed out the individual successes. And again, just a logic thing here. You can't blame everything that's bad or wrong with the team or its players on the coach, and blame everything that's good about it to individual player prowess. It's both, right? It's both all the time. And there are some Blazers who have made leaps, who Blazer fans actually love this season. Denny Avdia and Toumani Camara are examples 1 and 2. And both of them start, both of them get a lot of defensive trust. Neither one of them is a bit concerned about their green light and their permission to try what looks good. That is also a coaching issue. I mean, I happen to think, now I think Coach Billups could be more, schematically sound. I think the Blazers could run a few more plays, but it's also possible that those more complex plays are going to either confuse or stifle some of these players and their natural gifts. I get why the Blazers run the offense they do. I get also why the Blazers sometimes just go to switching everything, because it's simple, it's effortless, and it takes advantage of the natural abilities and agility and length of the roster without making the roster think about what they're doing and making players look over their shoulders. I think this shows up in a lot of ways. Three-point shooting was another one I mentioned. The Blazers don't hit their threes nearly well enough, but they never hesitate to take them. And that also is a coaching issue. You get no sense that the coach is breathing down any of these young players' necks, threatening them with loss of their playing time or whatever if they make a mistake. The Blazers are playing in a way that heightens a lot of these young guys' potential. And that's coaching. And Denny Avdia, Tumani Kamara, we mentioned that. Scoot Henderson, his development over the season has been great. That means he's had the space, the time, the potential to do so. And these same people who are complaining about Coach Billups not starting Scoot Henderson right now should also be praising, at least in some measure, Coach Billups for letting Scoot develop off the bench in his targeted minutes and roles, and Scoot becoming a success story. Do you know how far he was from that at the end of last season? Do you know how easy it would be to either give up on him or heighten his expectations, put 1,000 burdens on him, make him the starting point guard, and you've got to run this complex offense and just think, and turn him around and just get him lost. Instead, Billups put Scoot in a position to succeed, and Scoot has responded. And now that he's succeeded at a few things, he's able to succeed at more. Donovan Clingan, I think, poster child for this. And you see the coaching thing going on here, that people were complaining. Why is Clingan only getting 12, 13 minutes a game for the whole first half of the season and more? But you know what? He looked great in those 12 or 13 minutes. This is why you're saying he should get more. If he had looked horrible, you wouldn't be saying that. Coach Billups gave him the space, the right place, and the right opponent, and the second units, and all those things, just like we just talked about before, and set that up for Clingan to succeed. Now, when Clingan is stretching his wings, starting more because of injuries or whatever to people ahead of him, now Clingan doesn't look quite as good, but he has that solid base to rely on, so that as he steps forward, he has at least 1 foot on something and doesn't get swamped. And we remember also that he's a good player, not just that he's a player in over his head and doesn't look good. That's all coaching stuff. And I also mentioned offensive rebounding, the transition buckets, the things that have been points of emphasis for the Blazers this year. And the coach has coaxed that out of his team pretty well. So anyone who says Chauncey Billups hasn't done anything well, I think that is not fair. All right. Now, that doesn't mean that Billups has been a great coach or even a good coach. Rather, like Henderson, the things that are in his wheelhouse, the things that Billups has done well, yeah, I think he's done well at. I mean, the things that he's emphasized, he's done well at. But there are things that he doesn't do well. I mean, game management is one of them. Situational substitution management, sometimes clock management, often coaches' challenges, kind of random, don't make a lot of sense. Sometimes it's the wrong substitution. We saw that. The New York Knicks game that we just had, the final play, they were subbing people in. New York had the ball with a little over 3 seconds left. They were down by 2. And yes, you want to prevent the easy 2-pointer, but in 3 seconds, if your perimeter defender can hold the line a little bit and just not let his guy totally past him for 3 seconds, you can probably prevent that layup or dunk that you fear. That's what Donovan Clingan would prevent. But if you leave Clingan on the floor, probably they're not going to go at him in the lane. They're going to run a back screen or do whatever it takes in order to get Clingan outside at the perimeter. That's exactly what happened. And Mikal Bridges, all he had to do was find enough space over a lumbering and charging Clingan to get a 3-pointer up. He did it cleanly, and the shot went in. Donovan Clingan probably does not belong in the game at that point. Billups admitted it himself, even though Klingon is a good defender, not for that situation. That kind of thing is not isolated. Coach Billups has not, I don't know, like reading the players and reading the general style of game and what he thinks his team is going to be effective at. I think Coach Billups is fine at adjusting during that game, reading the opponent, adjusting for the opponent, with the asterisk that how many adjustments can you make with this roster? The roster's imperfect top to bottom, and you may make an adjustment, and it's like throwing the gear shift into a gear that you don't have. It's like trying to put it in fifth gear when it's a 4-speed. That might not work. However, even with that said, I don't think Coach Billups has been the best at that. I don't think that he's been quick in adjusting. I mean, halftime, for the whole first half of the season and more, opponents were coming out of halftime with whatever they needed to beat the Blazers, and handily did it in the third period. Third period was a sore spot for a long time for the Blazers, simply because the Blazers didn't adjust, right? And whether they were ahead or behind, they got swamped in the third. I think that's eased a little bit, but I don't think Coach Billups still is reading or has the library of resources to go to. I mean, one of the things, you love NBA players, and I think NBA players with a lot of seasoning as a coach can be really powerful because they have both the on-court experience and the whole suite of options to go to in the library to deal with situations. Okay. I think a player without coaching experience has the on-court knowledge and may have a fantastic on-court knowledge. But you know what? Those lifer coaches who have come up through the system and have seen everything and just stay up until 2 a.m. sweating over film, looking for the edge and seeing, exactly where a person's hands are and exactly how many steps they're taking as they slide shuffle sideways, and who's doing this and who's doing what, and what scheme is popular now, and who's made an adjustment at some college game in an obscure mid-major that might be able to affect things. Okay. I don't think players are always used to watching the game that way. And I think coaches do it not just because they're fascinated with it or have the brains to do it, but because literally that's their coaching life. If they're not going to be ahead of the curve, if they're not going to be an innovator, if they're not going to have every option at their disposal, then somebody else is going to beat them. And if someone else beats you as a coach, you don't coach for long. The players who transition to coaching take a while to learn that. I think that's why you see them floundering. They're very good at explaining why their team is losing, but not as good at explaining what to do about it 2 or 3 steps ahead. Okay. And I think Coach Billups is in that realm. And while I do respect what he has done well, and I think that we are seeing this season that maybe his coaching was undersold a little bit, it still hasn't been good enough. And he still doesn't have enough to where I would say, okay, he is ready to lead the next iteration of this team into the future for the next 3 or 4 years. And make no mistake, I think this is really where we're going now. If you establish that Scoot Henderson and Shaedon Sharpe have value to your team, and you just acquired Denny Avdia and Toumani Camara, which are going to be the backbone of at least your defense, if not your starting lineup, for the years to come. Now you have a backbone, and you have at least eyes or heart or some prospect in those starting guards. You have the beginnings of a team taking shape. If you also believe in Donovan Klingon, there's another one. Okay. So it's not like the end of last year where everything was nebulous and you don't know what you're doing and it's all about the talent acquisition. Now, I think the Blazers still have talent to acquire. They need to make more trades. They obviously need to draft well. It'd be great to have a huge high draft pick. But in some ways, the better that roster becomes, the more talent they acquire, the more important it is actually for that coach to be prepared, to be good, to be the guy for the future. And the Blazers are at a point where they are ready to adopt the guy of the future. Henderson will be in his 3rd season now, out of 5 in his rookie contract. Sharpe is a year farther along than that. Okay. And, Avdia and Camara are actually, they're not in the same spot, but they're ready to go right now. All right. Who's going to put this all together? It is time. Add to that another draft pick in the lottery this season, let alone if it's a high one, and it's really tough. So I don't think that you ride one more lame duck year with Billups. And I think you thank Chauncey for the 40+%. If he gets to 45, woohoo, that's awesome. If he's at 42, that's good. Whatever works. All right. But you thank him for the 40-ish win, and I shouldn't say 40-ish win, 40-ish winning percentage total this year, and say, that's the best you've done here. We appreciate that. Good job. But it's time for Coach Billups to move on to his second job, wherever that is, leading another team. It's time for the Blazers to get a coach who is ready to take them into tomorrow. For that reason, I would be surprised and I think somewhat disappointed if the Blazers did decide to pick up his option or extend him. The cake is baking in there. The team is moving. The train is on the tracks and has now started to go. We need the conductor in the locomotive engine who is ready to press all the buttons. And that's my take on this. But it doesn't mean that I don't think that Billups has done some good things. And that's end of story. And I think anybody who can't deal with that probably isn't looking with this. I get it. There's a lot of things that have gone wrong. There have been a lot of losses. There have been a lot of frustrations in very basic things that you're going to get when you hire a guy as an NBA head coach. And this is their very first time coaching anywhere. I understand that. I empathize with it. I said it 4 years ago when they hired him. This was no surprise, nor any surprise that they were going to lose a lot of games when they were rebuilding. However, that doesn't mean that we need to continue with this. And, as much as I can point out some good things that Chauncey Billups has done, I think it's better for him and better for the organization if they just move on. As we close here, we mentioned the Cleveland Cavaliers. I want to offer a heartfelt thanks to everyone. With about 3 or 4 weeks to go, less than 3 or 4 weeks to go, we had only had 600 tickets donated to Blazers Edge Night. We ended up in about a 3-week span with a total of 1,828, which we have now apportioned, which means against the Cleveland Cavaliers in just a couple weeks on March 25th, you are going to see and hear 1,828 young people and their chaperones from the Portland area cheer the Blazers in what should be a really good game if the Cleveland road game that went into overtime was any indication. And if the Blazers can restore some confidence and beat the Cavaliers that night, people will go crazy. But in any case, I want to thank every one of you who donated, who helped us get the word out. It's always a great experience. I will be there for that game, as I try to be every year, and just want to say it's the best thing that we do, and a great reason for this community to exist. So thank you with all my heart to everyone who helped make that happen. All right, we're going to move on now. We'll be back in another week or two to start talking about the real and the last 15% or so of the Blazers year. Hopefully we'll have some more developments to talk about and some more things to cheer and analyze. Until then, have fun watching this very interesting, very streaky, but also developing team. And we will see you next time.